Hello, Realtors. Welcome to your SCR update. This is episode 371. It is October 20th, 2025. And this is your go-to source for what's happening in the world of real estate and how it impacts you and your business. As always, I'm your host, Nick Kremydas, CEO of the South Carolina Realtors. And today I've got a couple of special guests to help me and help our brokers address crisis communications. That's our topic for today. All of you know Byron King, our general counsel here at SCR. Byron, welcome.
Thanks, Nick. Glad to be here.
I also want to introduce Deb Sofield. Deb is a dynamic keynote speaker, private speech coach, author of 5 books on presentation and motivational skills. She's also a radio talk show host on the Salem Network and president of her own executive speech coaching company. She trains women and men in success in public speaking, presentation skills, how to deal with the media, and of course, crisis communications, which is what we've asked her to come talk with us today. Deb is certainly no stranger to the realtor community. She's a friend and a mentor, a leader. She has addressed so many of our leadership training programs, our executive committees, boards of directors, and has led many media and spokesperson training sessions for our association here at SCR and local associations across the state. I can tell you that in all the years that I don't remember when I first met, but I'll never forget the counsel, the mentoring, and the advice that she has helped me with many times during my career. In today's digital world, social media has become an indispensable tool for real estate professionals. You use this to market your properties, build your brand, and generate leads. However, with the immediacy and lack of filters, not only on the platforms, but lack of individual filters, there is a risk that an agent's personal views can go over into their professional presence, leading to controversial content. And this controversy can damage your reputation as a broker in charge. This lack of separation between professional and personal identity can alienate potential clients and damage the agent's and, of course, by extension, the brokerage's reputation. As a result, the unfiltered nature of social media presents a significant challenge for real estate brokerages, making a clear crisis communication plan more critical than ever before. So today we're going to discuss this risk with our expert, Deb Sofield. Deb, welcome to the podcast this morning.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me. Always good to see you.
Thanks for being with us. So let's just dive right in. Let's talk about, what do you do when something hits the fan, the proverbial fan, right? What are the first steps? What's the immediate response? So Deb, what are the first 2 or 3 steps that a real estate brokerage should take when they become aware of a controversial social media post by one of their agents? How can a brokerage act quickly to control the narrative and prevent the situation from escalating?
So, powerful question to start off with today. Let's just start at the very beginning. Friends, it is not about winning, it is about damage control. And I can't stress that enough, because somebody feels the right to say something. I get it, but there's a lot of other people who will be affected by it. So let me start with the 3 I's. Immediately remove the post, internally address the agent's actions. And then my third point would be simply this: if needed, you're going to issue a public statement about what is said. Now, let's go a little bit deeper. Before you remove the post, take screenshots. You're going to need screenshots, so in a sense, you preserve the evidence, time, date. You might need that for legal or disciplinary action. So before you take it all down, make sure you know exactly what was said. Next, I would isolate and investigate. Take a look and see how far this went. How many people picked it up? Was it another conversation, or was it just a one-off? And really, if you have to, you might have to issue a clear public statement about where this organization stands. Now, If you attend the trainings that we do, you know I have the crisis communication handout. You as an agent or as a firm need to be able to say to the public that will be inundating your office, hey, yes, we know something has happened. This is what we call a holding statement, just to make sure that you're not consistently bombarded. And you're going to get questions of, hey, did you know? Yes, we do, and we are looking into it internally. I would say at some point you're going to have to direct everything to one person through your firm. And because of that, what I really would encourage is that you understand a pretty simple thing, and it's this: you need a plan. Something is going to happen. It is not if, but when. So, are you prepared? And I know in our time together, I'm going to talk through, and of course, with your team there, here's some things you probably need to do to prepare.
Thanks, Deb. And I think one thing that I think I've learned over the last few years, especially since COVID, is that most, if not many, of our real estate brokerages, our realtor firms, are not prepared for a communications crisis. And you've touched on it just briefly, but what should that comprehensive crisis communication plan, what should that look like for a real estate brokerage? And, you know, we always tell our agents, those that are affiliated with a broker in charge, to lean into their broker in charge, right? Their broker in charge is ultimately who is responsible for their license and their supervision. How does these specific roles get allocated between the affiliated licensees and the broker in charge? What's your recommendation?
First off, I think you have to have a plan. Remember, a plan tells us what to do, who does it, and how to communicate. You've got to put something on paper. But also, there's the other side. So everything is not Chicken Little. Let's figure out what activates a crisis plan. What is the criteria that actually says everybody's got to get into crisis mode? We've had a situation. Couple things you need to do. First of all, and I know this seems silly, but I see the mistake happen all the time. Who is allowed to speak to the media? Make that decision first and foremost. Make the decision who is not allowed to speak to the media, and then who's on your crisis communication team. When I say, let's figure out who's allowed to speak to the media, you've got to make a firm decision. Otherwise, you will be surprised how many people think it's their opportunity to get on television or to have a big splash. The damage is going to be great. And I go so far to say, let your team know if you cross this line, you will be dismissed. I think you have to have key contacts on file. Everybody has to make sure that we know how to reach our team. And that's a question I've been asking. How do I reach you at 3 in the morning? Because if I email you, you're probably not going to get it until 8 when you get up. If I text you, your phone is probably turned off. Do I have to come knock on your door? Ask your team, if I need to reach you at Sunday morning, 5 a.m., how will I do that? You have to do this in advance. And then I would say you need to make sure your team knows how to communicate with you. I also think you need a list. You need a list for a 24-hour situation. Who's in law enforcement that you know that you can make a call? Do you have to call a fire station? Who is a known media contact? And if you need to, is there a community leader? So you ask about responsibilities. Crisis communication manager, spokesperson. You might need a legal advisor. I would certainly make sure I have somebody in HR and IT. And if your firm is large enough, you probably have a social media manager who is pushing stuff out about the firm and the great work you've been doing. I'd wake them up and I would get them going. Something else I would consider, in advance, you might want to go ahead and have a few pre-approved messages or templates in case something were to happen. And then you ask your team, bring in a pizza, sit around the table, ask the question, if something were to happen, how would we respond? What I find is that leadership knows what's happening. The rest of the team does not. And 2 people in leadership, although that's terrific, you've got 40 people on the ground and they're confused because nobody gave them the guidelines.
I think there's, you know, oftentimes the I don't know whether it's in the ether of the internet or wherever it is, folks will argue back and forth between their their right to personal expression versus the need to protect your professional image and reputation, and your broker in charge should have a social media policy. And I've asked Byron to address this for us. Exactly how can they include that in their office policy, Byron? And when should you be transparent, and when should you lawyer up? When we saw last year, I think a communication failure. I think it's not out of school to talk about this, but the way NAR addressed the initial jury findings and the settlement and all of that, we obviously saw a situation where the lawyers were in control of the messaging, and it kept members in the dark, and it frustrated all of us. And we're seeing a huge change in NAR now because they're leading with transparency rather than lawyering up, so to speak. So when it comes to social media, what do you recommend?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So what we have a broker policy manual. You can contact the legal hotline, 803-712-3478. And brokers need to be proactive, put it in your policy. And kind of like, famous basketball player Michael Jordan said, well, why don't you talk about politics? He said, well, I sell Nike shoes to Republicans and Democrats. So you have free speech, but you also have a brand and a business that you're running. You're trying not to offend. You also have fair housing issues to contend with as a realtor, license law. You've got realtor code of ethics that you have to worry about if you're engaging in communications while you're practicing real estate. Use good judgment. Call the hotline if you have something that's potentially offensive, and we can hash it out with you.
Yeah, Deb, it can be challenging when you ask a lawyer whether they should be transparent or to lawyer up, right? I think we kind of know where they tend to lean. But when you're crafting a public statement, what do you suggest as kind of key elements of that? I know you've touched on it already, but the tone matters, right? The information matters. How do you suggest laying all that out?
Well, I have to say, when you talk about lawyering up, that scares me. I mean, you really cross the line if we're going to get there. But the reality is, as Byron's already said, this is in your handbook, and they need to sign off that they read that handbook. Once it's there, I believe you have something to fall back on. What I find so interesting is that people have a handbook and they haven't looked at it for about 4 years. And then they fall back on it and it doesn't really work. Okay, so let's just understand the bigger picture here. Your first message sets the tone for all future communication. And let's go through what has to happen. If you have to acknowledge the situation, and perhaps you do, we have to know what happened. We have to know did and where the incident actually occurred, who's affected by the incident, and then you've got to go back to what steps your organization is taking. You've got to keep it simple. Because if you don't, people are going to get confused, and then everybody's going to shout, "Did you know?" And you are starting all over again. Now, let me be perfectly honest with all the love in my heart. Nobody wants to hear, "It has come to our attention." No, I want to hear real words. We are heartbroken. This is not how we do business. Please give us a bit of grace while we figure this out. I believe you've got to put things in place that talk about the humanity of perhaps the situation. You went with the NRA situation. I'm going to talk about the Charlie Kirk situation. We saw people who went online who expressed their opinion, and it blew up. So again, everyone's like, the First Amendment. Well, great. That's what the government gives you. You work at my company and we have a different set of rules. So I would ask that you tread very carefully here, but in advance, I need to hear humanness. I need to hear the connectivity. I need to hear that you actually care.
So avoid phrases like "if anyone was offended" or things like that, right?
Because everybody's offended. You never want to give someone the chance to come back at you. So that's how you turn it around. You'd like to know, you understand, you're asking, versus the other, which always gives people a chance to say no. And remember, no is the easiest thing to say. A confused mind always says no. Just know that. And guess what? When it comes to social media, because you never get your full say, I don't get the tone, I don't get the tenor. All I get is no. And then you're having to, in a sense, start over again with your spokesperson or your media representative to put the issue not only into play, but in the proper order of what actually happened, not what we assumed happened.
I find it surprising sometimes that real estate firms who invest so much money in marketing and branding and building those reputations online and in person and throughout their communities often do not have a strategy, a structure in place for when something does go south, right? And so this is something that every realtor firm should have in their office policy and in their corporate structure, and hope that they never have to use it. Yes. Because once something happens, it is really, really hard to scramble and try to create this on the fly. And so beyond just talking about an immediate crisis, Deb, what are some additional steps that brokerages can take to protect their reputation? How can a brokerage use this kind of incident as a learning opportunity to strengthen its brand and help prevent future crises?
So that's a very large question. I'm going to go back to the one thing that I believe we've stressed throughout, and that is you've got to have a handbook. Everybody has to read it, and you have to sign off on it. Everyone. So as you know, I'm up here in Greenville, and a lot of my friends move from firm to firm. And I don't know if they got to a new firm and had to read their handbook. And listen, I get that you have freedom of expression. I get that you have opinions. But the other thing I would be very careful with is I've got a personal page, I have a business page. So you need to probably think through how that's going to lay out. You don't need to be spouting off on your business professional page. You probably need to make sure that you keep that to your personal page. And you might even need the line that says, hey, listen, this is my personal opinion. It does not reflect upon my company. I also would say everybody who is listening today, if you care about your reputation, I know you do, go ahead, have an all agent meeting. You need to talk through some of this because things are going to happen. And I may not have thought about it, but somebody else did. So now we're able to put that into a comprehensive list of what is the first call. I mean, truly, if you're not careful, you're going to Chicken Little this way to death. Not everything is a crisis. But what we have is a handbook that tells us what to do, who to contact. And I will say, I strongly encourage, if anything were to happen, Nick, they've got to reach out to you and your team there. You have the resources. Don't think you've got to go it alone. That's one thing I love about the realtors. It really is a family. No matter where I train across America in the realtor family, they know who to call. And if it has to get kicked up to national, then there is somebody who will help you. But you've got to have a living plan. It is a living, breathing document because let's be honest, television stations, assuming something terrible were to happen, they're not staffed from 11 till 4. So do you have the number of the general manager? Do you know how to get there? Is there somebody in law enforcement? So that is on you to do your homework and to lay it out. And also, here are the rules to work at our firm. Here's the thing. I always say to everybody, you've got to make sure it passed the newspaper test, which is if this decision were on the front page, written by a fair and critical reporter, and my family were to read it, how would I feel? And I think we forget that sometimes because we are so used to me versus what's actually happening in the world today. So the reality is I want you to learn your language. We are heartbroken. We are looking into this because you need to be careful. You do not want the, hey, did you know? And kaboom. The keyboard warriors will take you down in a heartbeat. Your firm can't afford that.
Yeah, if I could only tell you how many times I have shared that advice with my own staff here, looking at decisions that we make every day for our members. And that's, I always lead. I said, how would this decision look like on the above the fold on the state newspaper, right? And I think those are wise words. And it's always, go back to the golden rule, treating people like the way you'd want to be treated. And always doing the right thing, even when people aren't looking. If you follow the simple rules in life, it makes the hard decisions a lot easier. But unfortunately, over time, we have seen, Byron and I and the rest of our legal team here on the legal hotline, while we are not the Facebook police, we do get a lot of Facebook screenshots and X screenshots and other social media activities. And our routine is pretty simple, realtors. When we see an activity that we think could be a violation of code of ethics or even license law, our first course of instinct is to contact the broker in charge, inform the broker of this activity to make sure that they know what's going on, usually without judgment, right? It's a friendly kind of heads up call. The broker then is empowered to make a decision based on what they think this is, whether it's good or bad. We give them our advice and then they act. Some matters, if they involve public trust, have to be reported to the Real Estate Commission, of course. But for the most part, we are in the education business. And realtors, that's where I'm going to encourage you to help us. I just said, we're not the Facebook police, but our code of ethics, our license law is only as good as the paper it's written on if you are willing to stand up to enforce it. And the way you enforce it is by using opportunities to help mentor and lead other agents down the right path, filing complaints when necessary to uphold the tenets of the code of ethics and our license law, and not to be afraid to help improve the profession, because that person who did something wrong in your transaction that you refused to act on because you held their hand and cleaned up their mess and got the deal done because that's what you do, the fact that you didn't file a complaint means that person is going to do that same thing all over again to somebody else and possibly harm a consumer, possibly harm another realtor. We need your help to, when you see something, say something, contact the agent, broker in charge, file a complaint when necessary. So Byron, I think that's my soapbox for today. What do you think?
Sounds good. Call the hotline.
Call the hotline. Well, we're in our getting ready to start the third week of the government shutdown, Deb, and our members are being affected by this as we see a lot of the federal loan programs shut down. NFIP is on hold. Please read our Washington report that you'll see for more updates on this. But Deb, I want to thank you for your time this morning. Always enlightening, always educational, and always so professional. We appreciate you more than you know. And thanks for being with us this morning.
My pleasure. Have me back anytime.
Thank you, Deb. And thank you, Byron. And realtors, I know we're coming off of a really sad football weekend. We've both the Gamecocks and the Tigers saw some poor performance on the field. But did you know that there's still one undefeated team in South Carolina?
Yes.
Who?
Presbyterian Blue Hose.
That's right, the Blue Hose of PC.
And Naval Academy Goats.
And it seemed like I want to call it the Haberdashery Bowl, because they played Stetson this weekend, where my daughter is going to grad school, and their mascot is the Hatters. So the Blue Hose beat the Hatters this weekend in the Haberdashery Bowl. That's about as ESPN as I can get, Mike. Realtors, we will catch up again with you real soon. Thanks again to Byron and to Deb Sofield. Deb, how can folks get a hold of you? What's your website if folks need to get a hold of you?
Sure, thank you. It's my name, debsofield.com, SOFIELD.com, debsofield.com.
Thanks, Deb. Mike, if you could throw that link in the comments. Again, thank you, Deb. And realtors, stay safe, stay realtor strong, and we will catch up again with you real soon. Take care, everybody.